Mr. Bottoni, we are in the aftermath of a crushing defeat, which TISA party of Peter Magyar imposed on Viktor Orbán's party Fidesz. What is your assessment of the significance of this crushing defeat? What will change now in Hungarian politics?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. First, the numbers. TISA was able to gather more than 50% of the popular vote. It is very rare in a democracy that a single party can do this. And it wasn't expected that in Orbán's Hungary, after the systematic use of huge economic, logistic, and power resources to push the voters in the direction of Fidesz, the competitor party can not only challenge it, but also crush it electorally. This was made possible by several factors. The first is a very high turnout. Almost 80% of Hungarians showed up at polls, which is an unprecedented high turnout. Not only in Budapest and in major towns, but also in small villages. Second, Péter Magyar was a totally different type of opponent and competitor than all the others who preceded him. The others were a coalition of very heterogeneous left, liberal, green, or even right-wing parties, only united by the hate towards Viktor Orbán. Péter Magyar came from within the party, from Fidesz. He knew perfectly the techniques Fidesz is going to use against him and refused to do any coalition with the previous opposition parties and rallied and was able to gather people around some very simple but also important issues. The first was corruption, systematic corruption. The second was the misuse of European funds and the impoverishment of the country, the fact that Hungary has become, possibly after Bulgaria, now the poorest country in the European Union, despite a good starting level 20-25 years ago. And another important issue was education and health. These key sectors were totally obliterated by the Orbán government, and they were systematically underfunded. Péter Magyar promised deep reforms and even more, much more attention from the government to these key sectors, so education and public health. And the last but not least one, in the end, was the geopolitical importance of the elections. I think now that Viktor Orbán made one of his most important political errors ever by downplaying the significance of the cleavage line between East and West in the Hungarian society. Viktor Orbán didn't understand that for most ordinary Hungarians, belonging to the so-called West, which means European Union, NATO, what Putin calls the collective West, is really important. It really matters in their everyday life because many people commute, so many people have relatives or close friends abroad. Hungary is a transnational nation and a transnational country nowadays. So when the choice became geopolitical in the last weeks of the campaign, even more Hungarians rallied with Péter Magyar against Orbán than he did before. And I think that the landslide, now 2/3 parliamentary majority, is not only the result of the electoral system Viktor Orbán had created for himself and used 3 consecutive times in 2014, 2018, and 2022 to get a supermajority. But it is also the consequence of the geopolitical shift. Most Hungarians decided to stay with the West, notwithstanding the fact that the West is not perfect, the West can be made better, that you can criticize the West, but not the way Viktor Orbán was siding with the enemies of the West and notoriously Vladimir Putin. So in the real moment, it came out that Viktor Orbán and his foreign minister, Péter Szijjártó, are posing as agents of Moscow. We don't know to what extent they were really agents of Moscow, but they were posing in all transcripts, Hungarian and international press released. They were posing as Russian agents. They were exposed as Russian agents. I think that this became very detrimental to the Fidesz campaign, and that became one of the biggest weapons in the hand of Magyar, because they showed that Fidesz is really becoming a national security threat for Hungary.
Okay, my second question would be about what follows from now on. We had already some statements by Magyar that certain secret treaties or agreements will be exposed, certain hidden things will be made public about the rule until now. So that sounds like confrontation which is looming between him and Orbán's people. But on the other hand, the administration of the state regulators, a number of institutions are all until now have been loyal to Orbán. So what do you expect to happen from now on in Hungarian politics?
Mm-hmm. You have to imagine now something very unusual getting on in Hungary, or starting in Hungary. It is not just a normal turnover between political parties, but it is a regime change, a true one. It has to be a regime change. And the regime change is something we haven't had in Eastern Europe, in most countries, since 1989, 1990. So it is really a radical thing. In some cases, we know that it was not even peaceful. So regime changes are likely violent or very, very tense. So the hope here is to keep an ongoing regime change within the limits of public normality, which means no mass violence, which means no reprisals, which means standard procedures, but replacing the most exposed stuff in the public administration, especially in diplomacy, especially in the secret services, especially in public media, especially in the economic sphere, for example, in the dismantling the oligarchic system, is not only necessary, politically necessary for Magyar, but it is also much needed by the population. Magyar delivered this promise to the population that I will free you from this system. So now people will ask for it. So I think that in the next couple of weeks, we will see a difficult balancing between stability and change. Of course, you have to keep the car running. So the state administration can't be replaced. And I'm personally convinced that the overwhelming part of the state apparatus, of the state administration, either voted for Tiso, which we also have proof of. So many people were secretly siding with Tiso, but they were afraid of telling it in public. So they had enough, basically, but they didn't want to come public until the elections. Or many people will adapt pragmatically to the new situation. We can make jokes about this, but this is something that usually happens when big political changes come. A different issue is the treatment of former oligarchs or those in the government, just to name a couple of persons. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó, or the minister in charge of the state propaganda and the secret services, Antal Rogán. So I couldn't imagine how they could avoid having jailed or put in trial unless they try to escape. So I think that in some personal cases, I can imagine a rough path for them. I can imagine something we usually don't have in democracies, but we have to understand that it was no longer a democracy. So the process of restoring democracy and making changes is more radical here than in a normal standard procedure, because so many people got used within Fidesz to the idea of unlimited power for an unlimited amount of time. And now they have to go to understand that it is over. As Romanians say, it's gata. There is no more shots possible for those who took part in the system and in the illegalities committed by the system. Of course, we are not speaking about the almost 2.5 million ordinary Hungarians who voted for Fidesz, the so-called believers, or those who were forced by clientelistic means to vote for Orbán. But so I think that we will trying to find a balance between continuity and change, and this will be fascinating to be studied.
You said this is a regime change, and you also said there will be a balance between continuity and change. Here is my question on that. Peter Magyar had some positions which didn't sound so different from Orbán's. For example, from what I understood in media, he is against military aid to Ukraine, or is not pushing for fast membership of Ukraine in the EU. There were also messages that he seems to be not so clearly pro-LGBT, or his stance on LGBT issues is not clear. So he's conservative, he's Fidesz member. So in what ways could we expect continuity?
Okay, I think that on Ukraine, Péter Magyar shared most of Fidesz positions until 2022. So I'm personally convinced that he was part of this Hungarian center-right-wing consensus over the fact that Ukraine is a very strange state and they are not treating well the Hungarian minority. After the outbreak of the war, he indeed made a thing no Hungarian politicians from Fidesz ever did. He went to Ukraine, he went to Bucha, he went to Kyiv as a private person. But of course, media covered his trip. And I think that he made a point here. Vladimir Putin should end this war, and not at the terms the Russian geopolitics imagined, which is dismantling the sovereignty and denying sovereignty to Ukraine or partitioning this country. So when Péter Magyar says we don't want to sell troops to Ukraine, I think that he's very much within the European mainstream, because very few politicians in Europe could now govern in France or in Germany, in Italy, pretending that they are planning to send troops to Ukraine. In what concerns the economic aid, he made a point yesterday, which I think that can be understood, if not defended, which is the following. Hungary is now and will be in the next month in a very difficult economic and financial position, which is true. Hungary is not now in the position to take part in the financial aid of Ukraine, but we are not going to stop or prevent other countries from doing it. So we will be cooperate from kind of outside, which is a much more flexible position than the position Orban has shown over the last month. And I think that this is the maximum that European partners can now expect from a leader like Péter Magyar. Not only because he's personally conservative or right-wing, but also because the mental state of the country and the overwhelming tasks he has inside the country dictate this kind of line. For what concerns LGBTQ rights, Hungary has a law on the recognition, formal recognition by the state of same-sex couples. It is not marriage, it is a civil contract. This law was approved, so is in force since 2009. Péter Magyar said that he's going to enforce this law. He's totally in favor, but he wouldn't like to change now the constitution for what concerns the definition of marriage as the union between man and woman. Of course, we can discuss over this, but I think that his position is clear from the point of view of individual freedom. So when he says, for me, so he's committed to the fact that everyone is free to love whoever he or she wants, regardless of gender. I think that this is once again an important statement after 16 years of full illiberal and homophobe cultural policy, which was not the fringe in Hungary, but it was the mainstream. So I think that it is better now to go step by step. If we want to enforce these rights, and if we want the Hungarian society as a whole to understand that same-sex marriage doesn't equal to the death of the nation, doesn't equal destroying the national identity, but it is just on the long run about ensuring all citizens, all people of Hungary, the same rights. I think that this is a process, and I think that it is important that the external world really understands the level of perversion of the state mind of ordinary Hungarians, which have gone through over the last 16 years. So we have to convince about very basic facts people who have experienced a parallel reality for the last good couple of years. It is not easy. It will take a moment or more than a moment. I think that it is important to get started without pretending to go too fast. So we have to wait for the Hungarian society to keep up with this rhythm.
Okay, Poland, Polish politicians, Polish elites were very much interested in Hungarian elections and their outcome, as well as Romanian ones, and even I would say Bulgarian ones. So here is a question which I think fits you, because you have a book on Orban and you are knowledgeable on what is called illiberal democracy. So what is the fate of illiberal democracy in our region in this moment, in the time that is coming now, 4 years after the start of the war in Ukraine?
Of course, I hope that the fate is a bad one, and the fate is a decline. Of course, I am not sure. Hungary could serve as a good example on how to peacefully dismantle and undo a constitutionally grounded illiberal regime, which is a big fact. Poland, the Polish opposition, which was much better placed and organized than in Hungary, had a much easier task because illiberal Poland was not a constitutional regime. And we see how difficult it has been in Poland and still is. So I don't underestimate the difficulties Péter Magyar will face in Hungary, but I would argue that the opportunity he has got through a super majority, through a constitutional majority in the new parliament is huge, because he really got the maximum level of legitimacy a political figure can get in Europe. And he can also show others, for example, the Serbian opposition, the Slovak opposition, the opposition, the Romanian, I would say, liberal democratic or left-wing forces, so the mainstream forces, the pro-European forces, a model on how to tackle the illiberal and the so-called patriot sovereignist movements. And you can do it from the right, you can do it from the left, but more importantly, you have to do it grassroots. One of the most important things TISA was able to achieve is to get very deep roots in the Hungarian province. TISA is not an upward community descending from Budapest into the countryside, but if you look at the several thousand active, vibrant TISA islands in every Hungarian village, basically, and small towns, you see really a new political reality. This reality was very much there in the Hungarian society, because people are basically the same, but these people mobilized over the last years, and immediately realized that they are able to do great things, even if politicians don't tell you at every moment what to do, first, so self-organization, and second, even if you are financially weak, if you don't have money, they gather money through social media, through Donably, through other means. They used their homes as their own office, their own tools as the tools of the party. So when we speak about civil society, which is very often something we are not really able to grasp, I think that the way, not Péter Magyar as the leader of the party, but the way hundreds of thousands of ordinary Hungarians involved themselves into politics, into public life over the last years, is something really unprecedented. And I think that this must become the model, not Péter Magyar. Of course, Péter Magyar is a remarkable politician because he has remarkable skills. He can't be cloned. You can't clone him, but you can take example on how thousands or tens of thousands of ordinary people have started to do politics every day in their own settlements. This is something that really can be exported.
Until now, under Orban, Hungary has been very influential in Southeastern Europe. And if now there is a regime change, how will this regime change affect Hungarian influence in the region and Hungarian foreign policy in our region, Southeastern Europe, I mean?
We have to see what happens in other countries as well, of course. We will have elections around, and we always have elections. I think that Serbian autocrat Vučić is already take note of what happened in Budapest, and he's very nervous because the Serbian opposition, which is socially huge, but politically impotent, now has a model, or has an example set on how to tackle these guys. Slovakia watched the Hungarian electoral battle through Slovak eyes, and they watched it. They followed it so closely. It was like elections were happening in Slovakia and not even in Hungary. It was really weird. In the Czech Republic, this also became part of the internal party competition. And of course, in Romania, where a very sizable, more than 1 million strong Hungarian minority lives, the Hungarian elections are also part of the internal political agenda. And I think that when Peter Magyar said Slovak, Romanian, Serbian journalists yesterday in the international press conference, guys, we are back. We are back on Central Europe. We want to expand Visegrad, which was, I think that it was an important message. He spoke about Austria. He spoke about Austria, but why not expanding it to Slovenia, to Croatia, to Romania? Why not making Visegrad a new form of regional cooperation, post-communist? But we are still speaking about post-communism almost 40 years after, but very simply East Central European cooperation, which is so much missing from the way the European Union is designed. So I think that the message is, guys, we are back. We want pragmatic cooperation. We don't want to interfere in your internal life, which is so important. If you think about the fact that Orban has tried to meddle in the internal affairs of so many countries, probably not Romania because it was too big to be addressed, and if there was meddling, it was done through the Mere, through the Hungarian party in Romania. But the message was, we want a different Hungary on a diplomatic plan too. And I think that this is encouraging, because many things can be achieved if these countries, whose interests are very much similar within the EU, join forces and start to more closely cooperate on economic, cultural, and other issues.
Okay, Orban had some talent in attracting Chinese investment while staying somehow away politically from Western Europe. So I have two questions here. First, how fast do you expect to be the warming up with Western European political elites now that he has full power? And secondly, what will happen with the Chinese investment in Hungary?
Mm-hmm. Hungary is so much dependent on the European from the EU funds that a good working relationship with Brussels is vital, not only to the survival, but to the stable functioning of a new government. Hungary very badly misses the 20 billion frozen euros since 2022. Hungary has to be restored as a rule of law country, not only because people voted for it and Peter Magyar wants it, but also because this is the conditionality for the release of these funds. So this is very important. And if we don't forget the fact that TISA party is a member of the European People's Party, this might be a guarantee. Of course, we have the precedent of Viktor Orbán's party. Orbán was also vice president of the EPP until 2019, and Fidesz was also a prominent member of the EPP for so many years. And the democratic backsliding in Hungary started precisely while that was happening. This is a very bad example. This is a very bad precedent. And I think that now the EU is a little bit smarter than 10 years ago. I think that they have really now understood that it is important to be preventively more vigilant on member states than they were with Orban in the last decade. And I'm quite confident that the working relationship will be better. As for China, I don't think that Chinese investments will suddenly end in Hungary. But Magyar immediately identified a couple of issues and problems. The first is useless investments. For example, the railway line between Belgrade and Budapest, getting to nowhere, overpriced, full of corruption, and at least in the Hungarian section, unuseful if you know the direction of this line for internal use. So while in Serbia it makes sense to link Belgrade to Novi Sad and Subotica, so basically the south and the north of the country, the tracks in Budapest, the tracks between Subotica and Budapest carefully avoid every big town in Hungary. They could have, for example, crossed Szeged, Kecskemét, and speed up really the connection between southern Hungary and Budapest. Nothing happened. So it was a lost occasion, and also a huge spending of public money. The other difficult point is, of course, the new lithium battery plants already opened or planned in Hungary. Peter Magyar made clear that every new investment will be closely scrutinized and watched for what concerns working conditions and also environmental issues. It is a controversial issue, of course, and most of the Hungarian society seemed to reject the way these investments, not only from China, it is important to underline this, but also from South Korea, for example. So it is not any ideological issue here, but just an issue of what kind of investments do we need now. So this is an issue on which the relationship with China will probably be less cordial or less close than it was under Orban, but this is also possibly part of the change.
Final question. There is a theory that the departure of Orban creates a void, geopolitical void, if you wish, in the region, given that he was on good terms with Trump, Putin, China, etc. So do you expect that there will be new candidates for Orban's role in the region? Bear in mind that just a few days in the future, in this Sunday, we have elections in Bulgaria, where some of the leading political parties seem to be also pro-Hungarian or pro-Orban, depending on how you define.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was a slogan in Yugoslavia after the death of Tito in 1980. After Tito, Tito. After Tito, there was no Tito. And I don't think that we will have another Orban after Orban. Orban was a very skilled, talented, and intelligent politician. He could have used his almost unlimited power to really create a strong and powerful Hungary. He wasted most of it. But I think that there is no successor or no natural successor to him in Hungary. And I don't personally see anyone in Central Eastern Europe having the same blend of political intelligence, charisma, and stamina to be able to become a new 21st century of Orban now. And I don't think that, after all, this is such a bad. So we have enough not so skilled, not so talented, right-wing, populist, sovereignist, so-called patriot politicians from the extreme right, something to the radical left. I think that they will keep to emerge all over the place. In some places they will get power, but I think that we have now set a very important example about what happens if the society is not vigilant over politicians, if the society doesn't really keep an eye on them, if the society leaves them getting unlimited power. And the second good example Hungary might have set now is how to dismantle, how to get rid peacefully, without armed revolutions, without a Maidan, without riots, of an illiberal regime. So I think that Hungary, which has been so often depicted and described as an illiberal laboratory of transnational politics, what about if Hungary becomes a potential liberal laboratory for something different? And I'm not making here Péter Magyar, the conservative Péter Magyar himself, as the leader of a new liberal left-wing, whatever, transnational company, because he's not. He's a conservative, moderate, center-right man from Hungary, and he is very sincere about this. But the most important thing here is establishing a new democratic consensus, which is more and which is different from the old post-communist democratic consensus. And the new democratic consensus is, do we believe in the Western alliance, which doesn't automatically mean neoliberalism and war-mongering, what Western alliance meaning individual and civil rights, rule of law, respect of human rights, and so on and so forth. If we agree on this, we are part of the consensus. If we don't agree on this, we are outside the consensus. We want something different from the right or from the extreme left, but we have to face the fact that our so-called friends, or better, our so-called handlers, will be people like Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or Bolsonaro or Netanyahu, or this is the blend of leaders who are our so-called friends. And I think, after all, that Viktor Orbán was condemned to lose by the fact that most Hungarians, at least and at last, recognized in the last weeks of the campaign that it was all about this. It was even more than about being poor, being corrupt, not being a rule of law state. It was really about being sold or sent to another continent, while most Hungarians still wanted to be part of the European Union.
Because you're a biographer of Orban, and it is, I think, a good question to ask what follows now for Orban. What are we to expect from him? What role will he play now when he has fallen?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet. It has to be seen. Of course, much depends on what are his plans. I don't think that he really and seriously thinks he might have a second or a last chance in the Hungarian politics now. But I'm not sure he's able to reckon with the fact that he might end in jail. He might end in another country. He might face serious consequences for what he and his own regime have done to Hungary, have done to the economy and the society of this country. his first concession speech was very short and didn't show any signs of deep reckon. Let's see what happens in the next few days and weeks, because of course the personal fate of Viktor Orban will also impact on the fate of sovereignism and on the fate of this transnational illiberal network. And if we look at the last statement by Vice President J.D. Vance of the United States, who now declares that he knew that Viktor Orban might lose the elections. Wow, this is a big change compared to what I personally heard last week from J.D. Vance, who declared that Viktor Orban, of course, will win these elections. So I think that when you lose, when you become a loser, so many people distance themselves from you, and so many people pretend they never met you, they don't even know you. I think that the political career of Viktor Orban, as we knew it, has now come to an end.